Got it. See if anybody joins us a little later.
The radical fundamental principles of freedom,
Weird today.
rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday afternoon in Puerto Rico. Hopefully everybody's doing well and having a great weekend. That the music sounded weird today, metallic and a little off. I don't know if that sounded the same to you guys, but that's how it sounded to me. All right, today is Ask Me Anything Day. We've got a couple of panelists. We've got Jennifer and Adam here. I expect we're going to be joined by a few other people. We'll see if that happens. I know we had at least 5 people sign up for this, so we'll see. We'll see if they show up, and we're going to take questions from Adam and Jennifer, and then we're going to go to your super chat questions. So today's the day to ask me about anything, at whatever dollar amount you would like, but otherwise it's just going to be the Jennifer and Adam show. So all right, let's get us started with Jennifer. You want to get us started with a question?
Okay. Yesterday, I think it was, or the other day, we were talking about the false alternative. It's a false alternative people give, whether it's either human well-being or nature. And I was thinking that goes to show that they don't really care about human well-being, because it's not either or. You know, like there's more bald eagles, for example, now than there was in the 60s. And there's also millions more people and more buildings and more industry. So you can do both. So,
well, to some extent, you know, but there are lots of species that have probably gone extinct. There are probably going to be a bunch of species that still go extinct. And I'm sure some of that is caused by human action. So what'll happen, I think, is that the species that have value to human beings, whether for aesthetic reasons or like the bald eagle, I think, or for consumption, right? We have a lot more chickens in the world today than we would if we didn't eat chickens. We have a lot more, you know, and they're probably in Africa, they're discovering that if you allow for hunting of certain animals and you privatize that and you protect the hunting and you protect the herd to make sure that there's going to be hunting, then you get fewer poachers. And you actually get more elephants or more lions. So, but they, you know, so I guess the consumption there is hunting. So if you can find a human value for the species, then yeah, there's somebody's going to invest in it, and somebody a value to somebody, then they'll probably survive. But at the same time, it's absolutely true that we change nature. And that we, quote, destroy some of it. If you like virgin forests, then there are fewer virgin forests than there used to be. There are more forests, but there are fewer virgin forests. Now, some people like virgin forests rather than ordinary forests. So because they're more abundant, I don't know, whatever. So, you know, I didn't want to say yesterday that there was no trade-off. There definitely is a trade-off. But the standard for the trade-off should always be human life, human values. And that should be the criteria by which we judge and evaluate whether we're successful with regard to the trade-off or not.
yeah, and it's a collectivist view too, because different individuals value different things. Like you said, if you value elephants, you might want to buy some for safaris or whatever, and then other people won't. So, you know, there's room for everything, but they act like, no, it's only my way or that's it.
Yeah, and if it turns out that you value something that not enough people value and you're not rich enough to keep it around, then it'll go out of existence. Maybe.
Yeah, that's like anything. Like, yeah.
So your whims don't determine, but the marketplace determines. if there's enough interest, if it's valued enough, or if there's enough money at the margin to keep it going, then it'll keep going. And if not, it's just like, you might have a favorite restaurant that you value a lot, but if not, if other people don't like it, if other people don't go a lot, then it will shut down.
Yeah, they just want to force their values on you, and they won't even discuss what we just said.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. Adam.
Yes. My first biggie is life extension. You mentioned that you use one of the Elysium products. I use two supplements that were recommended by my gerontologist, and by the way, she's a research physician at UCLA, and she recommends coenzyme Q10 as well as Elysium basis. For the other Elysium products, there aren't really enough interaction studies in the literature to know that they are safe when taken together. Did you discuss this with your doctor, and what does your doctor think?
Yeah, I mean, my doctor, I wanted something to enhance immunity, particularly given how much I travel and how many viruses and bacteria I'm probably exposed to all over the world. So she recommended Elysium format, which is an immune supplement, and I didn't discuss with the studies and everything, but it's so personalized, right? Because you mentioned CoQ10. I've taken CoQ10 in the past, and I get sick from it. I am allergic to. I get some kind of reaction. I get nausea. I took it for a long time, and I couldn't understand why was I feeling so bad. And then as soon as I stopped taking it, I felt better. And then it looks like I've been taking this NMN from Elevant. It's called Prime. And that caused nausea for me too. So, and the doctor recommended that. So I think that a lot of these things are personal, very personal in terms of your particular metabolism, particular gut bacteria, particular, immune response. So, I think you just have to, a lot of it's trial and error. And then, in terms of interaction, I don't take a lot of other things. So I'm taking.
Yeah. To follow up on that, with many of these compounds, it's probably possible to make them less reactive and less dangerous by just changing one or two amino acids in the peptide making up the protein. However, that makes it into an artificial drug, which would put it under the jurisdiction of the FDA, which would definitely say no, because their doctrine, which, by the way, was never legislated by Congress, it's just a presidential directive from President Bush, who was guided in this by Leon Kass, whom I consider one of the most evil people around.
Me too.
Is that aging is not a disease, therefore artificial drugs and clinical trials in that area are absolutely prohibited.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and that's absolutely the case. The FDA won't allow for pharmaceuticals that actually promote life extension or fight, quote, aging, because of everything you said, because of Leon Kass and the Biotech Commission that was deployed in the 2000s under Bush. They document where they explain why they're generally against anti-aging medication or anti-aging treatment. Is one of the most evil documents ever written. But yes, this is the world we live in. So what they have to do is they have to do natural, quote, supplements. They can't create it's very difficult to create formulas that gain them very rigorous IP. As a consequence, the upside for profit is limited. And as a consequence, there's a lot fewer clinical trials. So not only don't we get the so-called artificial, but we also get a lot less research, a lot less clinical trials. So we know a lot less about these compounds, and we know a lot less about their efficacy. And to a large extent, our doctors, as good as they might be, a lot of it is guesswork, because they don't really know with regard to aging, and it's a difficult topic anyway, because it's hard to do clinical trials for aging. And there's a lot of conflicting information. But yeah, my approach is take the things that seem the most likely, take them one at a time. Now I've learned, so that I know which one I'm allergic to and which one I'm not, which one I tolerate and which one I'm not, and keep playing around with them until I find a combination that's okay. And then, I will never know if they actually extended my life or didn't. Because who knows how long I'd live without them and how long I'd live with them. So
that's your private hat, but you're also the chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute. Why isn't this a major political issue for the Ayn Rand Institute? I consider it at least as important as abortion, and I've seen a lot of articles and videos on abortion, and so far not a single one on freedom to do the clinical work with life extension and modify the molecules, make them more acceptable, and so on.
I mean, I think in terms of the Institute, it's a question of choosing the topics to be discussed. We don't do a lot of political topics. One of the reasons abortion is a big deal is because for Ayn Rand it was a big deal, there are big cases. I think if Leon Kass was writing today and wrote that piece and published that piece today, I think the Ayn Rand Institute would come out with a rebuttal on that and go after. Certainly, I would on the show. I would take that piece, take it to pieces. I think the Institute picks and chooses where it can make a big difference. But I take your point. I mean, this is a good issue. It might be an issue that could attract a lot of people, Silicon Valley types, kind of the billionaires who invest a lot in life extension. There's no specific reason, and part of it is the interest of the intellectuals at the Institute. They write on what they're interested in.
Yes, but the Leon Kass memorandum is still in force, and because it is still in
nobody
force,
knows about it. So a big part of why you write.
Many people don't know about it.
No, but one of the big reasons why you write is to gain attention, not to convince. So you're not going to gain attention by digging up a document for 2005. Nobody cares. But you're going to get attention about a Supreme Court decision tomorrow. If the Supreme Court took up a case relating to this issue, we would definitely comment on it. You'd get a lot of attention on it. So the way you pick topics is not because you think that on any issue you're going to convince anybody. Indeed, I don't know if we convinced anybody on abortion, but you pick a topic with the idea of, in a sense, getting press, getting attention, and getting people because of that to read Ayn Rand. And if we thought we could get that with this issue, and I think maybe we can. I think given a generation now of billionaires investing in this, maybe this would be something that they would pay attention to. I'll bring it up. It's a good point.
That was my first.
All right. Let's thanks, Adam. So let's take a couple of questions from the super chat. We only got a couple of questions, and then we'll go back to Jennifer and Adam. So let's start with Robert. Robert says, "Happy Sunday from a Jennifer super fan." Jennifer, you've got a super fan. My question, maybe I missed the explanation, but what's the story behind the new Reason Beaver Yaron Brooks Show YouTube member icons? I don't know.
Didn't Catherine make that up?
Who?
Catherine, I think, made that up, I think.
You know, so Robert, Catherine, and Christian do stuff without asking me. So I have no idea. I am completely in the dark. I'm probably more in the dark than you are about this. So no clue. Sorry you wasted $20 for me to say, I don't know. But that happens once in a while because I don't know everything. It sounds like Jennifer knows more than I do on this. So let me check with Catherine and with Christian. Maybe we can get you an answer. All right, Ginger, thank you, $50. Would you talk about what to look for in a financial advisor? What credentials, characteristics, any suggestions? Yeah, I mean, I would look for, you know, and we have a couple of financial advisors who support the Iran Book Show. So if you write to me, I can probably get you their contact information. I've recommended both to people in the past. So feel free to write to me and I can do that. But I would look for somebody who have A, experience, but B, has the general approach that for the most part, they can't beat them. They're not going to beat the market significantly. They can't time the market. They don't know exactly when the market's going to go up and exactly when the market's going to go down. They take a diversified approach to markets. They want to very much understand your goals in your investing, what's your time horizon, what's your risk tolerance. For example, if the market goes down tomorrow 20%, how much sleep are you going to lose as a consequence? Those are the kind of questions they should be asking you. Kind of, how risk tolerant are you? What's your time horizon? You know, what other assets do you have? And then they should be steering you towards a diversified portfolio. And the nature of that diversified portfolio would depend on your age and your risk preference and how many other assets and where they're invested, the other assets are. They might, I like financial advisors that primarily focus on index funds and a variety of different index funds, but some of them will also have certain managed accounts that they have a lot of experience in, which they highly recommend, and that's fine as long as it's only a segment of what you're doing, and you still get the broad diversification. So you want to be in as many asset classes as possible. You want as wide. You want to be international. You want as wide as a diversification as possible. And another thing is fees. Since your financial advisor is going to charge you a fee, you want to make sure that the funds they put you into are generally very low fee funds, because otherwise you're paying a lot of money for the fund and a lot of money to the financial advisor. And no matter how good any of them are, you're never going to make a lot of, you're not going to match the market. So the fees are important, you know, and you have to like them. You know, one of the biggest roles a good financial advisor has is holding your hand. It's being a good psychologist with regard to your finances. It's somebody that tells you not to panic when the market goes down a lot. Somebody tells you not to try to time the market exactly. It's somebody that treats you with respect, but that you trust and you like, and that you can actually talk to. It's somebody that might be an advisor. You know, if you have a change in your family situation, or if you want to buy a house, or if you want to splurge on something. So you want to pick somebody you really like and that you feel like you can really talk to. That's the other aspect of it. Hope that's helpful, Ginger. But email me at yuran@yuranbookshow.com if you want specific names. All right, let's go back to Jennifer and Adam, and then we'll go back to more of the super chat questions.
Okay, to draw on your military experience, what do you think of the current pace of arms deliveries from the US to Ukraine, and also the replacement of arms that went from the former Soviet bloc countries now in NATO, like Poland and Czechia and Romania, to Ukraine. They need to be replaced with American weapons. And again, is that replacement going on fast enough? Because my understanding is that every state National Guard in the US, there are 50 of them, has a HIMARS that's used for training on weekends.
Yeah.
And it's not used at all when it's not used for training the National Guards on weekends. And we could be bringing in personnel from Ukraine and Eastern Europe to train them on the other days of the week.
Yeah, no, we could be doing a lot more if we wanted to. We'd have to devote money and resources and time to doing that. There is a limit on how many HIMARS we can actually get to Ukraine at any given point in time. There are not that many of them. There's also limited munitions because they fire these rockets, and you have to have an inventory of the rockets. Those are also not in abundance. So the U.S. has to evaluate how many it wants to keep on reserve, although it's unlikely unless Russia attacks a NATO country that the U.S. is going to use HIMARS anytime soon. But yeah, no, there's no question that all this has been slow and tentative and uncertain, and our politicians don't know exactly what to make of the whole thing, and they don't want to overcommit. There's also the challenge of training. Now, we could bring them here, but most of the training is happening in Europe. So we're not bringing a lot of Ukrainians to the United States. Most of the training is happening in places like Germany and Poland with equipment that is already there for NATO. I don't know why that is easier than bringing them to the U.S. and then using the National Guard. But I also know that the military in the U.S. is super bureaucratic. It's super inefficient when it comes to these things. And there might be some bureaucratic constraints about training a foreigner on a National Guard thing during the weekday. I mean, who knows? But I wouldn't be surprised if there were those kind of limitations on top of that. In terms of getting, Russian equipment to the Ukrainians, old Russian equipment from the old Soviet bloc to the Ukrainians, for the Czech Republic and for Poland. I don't know how fast that is going. The Poland was going to give them the MiGs, and then they weren't going to give them the MiGs, and the U.S. wouldn't replace them, and then they would replace them. There's a lot of politics going on in the background. There's a lot of fear in the Biden administration of crossing some line that pisses off Putin, that causes him to, use tactical nukes or go after Poland or do something like that. There's real fear. There's no question that the United States, everything it's doing is tentative and slow and cautious and step by step. So they send these weapons, they see what other Russians respond, then they send more weapons and they see other Russians respond. So it doesn't surprise me that it's very slow. But it's also true that the Ukrainians can only absorb so much at any given time. You can only train so many people. I don't know how. We have very little insight through the research I've done into how many forces Ukrainians have in different divisions, and who are trainable, not trainable, professional, amateurs, all of that. The Ukrainians have purposefully not revealed that information. We have a lot more information about the Russian forces than we do about Ukrainian forces. Maybe that's partially because nobody in the West wants to provide that information because they know the Russians can use it against the Ukrainians. So it's hard to exactly tell what is going on. But Ukraine, should and could get a lot more of these weapons from the Europeans. and the Europeans could then buy the weapon systems from the US. I think that's what the focus should be primarily. We can send them a few of our very sophisticated weapon systems that are easy to train on, like the HIMARS. I don't know, we talked about the HIMARS a few episodes ago. These are very accurate, very sophisticated, very fast, very mobile missile launchers that are actually wreaking havoc on the Russians right now. Destroyed a number of their ammunition dumps, have killed a number of their generals, have destroyed command and communication and command centers, and have weakened the Russians significantly. They are they're light years ahead of where the Russians similar missile systems are. So the few that we've given the Ukrainians have already been put to amazing use and have inflicted significant damage on the Russians. If we gave them more, this war would move a lot faster. But again, I don't know if Ukraine is in a position to absorb more of them. It's really hard to tell what is going on exactly in Ukraine. I should do what Lex Friedman did, and I should go to Kiev and talk to them. But I think my wife would kill me before I made it to the border. Jennifer's going, no, don't.
Oh,
Okay, as a
I'd get a
former-
lot more following if I'd get a lot more subscribers if I did some live shows from Kiev as the bombs. No.
Okay, also as a former tank crew member,
Yeah.
how would you compare the U.S. Abrams with the Korean K2? I understand that Poland recently decided to have a force that's 2/3 K2, up armored with an additional 2 tons of reactive armor, and 1/3 Abrams. What do you think the comparison is?
I mean, I think they're quite similar. I think if you take the Abrams, the Korean tank, the new German tank, and the Israeli Merkava, there's a lot of similarities. And the primary is what makes them particularly interesting is how much they care about keeping the crew alive versus the Russian tanks, where they don't really care much about keeping the crews alive. So they have a lot more reactive armor. The Korean tank is very so reactive armor. What happens with reactive armor is it's a plate that goes on the outside of the tank and it covers the entire tank, or it covers the key strategic areas in the tank. And if an anti-tank missile or another tank shell from an enemy tank hits the tank, as soon as it hits, instantaneously this armor implodes. And what it does is by imploding, it takes that force that from the missile coming in and disperses it. So what happens is you don't get penetration into the armor of the tank itself. So you don't get penetration into where the troops are. It might still debilitate the tank. It might still slow it down. It might make it inoperable depending on where it hits and how many times it's hit. But it won't actually kill the crew for the most part, right? So it's truly an amazing technology. It existed. The Israeli army already had it in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It's probably a lot more sophisticated today. But the Russians don't have it. I think some of the latest T-72s and maybe T-80s have it, but they're not as good, and they're not as cautious. And you can see, I don't know if you've seen the pictures from the damaged T-72s in Ukraine, but some of the pictures are unbelievable. You see the torrent of the tank, the section that turns around. If you hit the tank just right, this thing, the whole tank implodes and the torrent just flies into the sky. And there's some videos of this thing just going up into the sky. You can just imagine what's happening to the people inside the tank. They're torn to shreds. My guess is, and I don't know much about the Korean tank, but my guess is that it's pretty comparable to the Abrams in terms of speed, firepower, and protecting the crew. My guess is that Poland probably wants to diversify sources. It's probably good for most countries not to have one source for all all their weapons, but you don't want to over diversify because then you have to train your people on multiple weapon systems. So if you have 2 or 3 suppliers, that's pretty good. Israel typically has Abrams and it has its own tanks. I don't know if they still produce the Merkava. That was the tank that they started producing in the late 70s, early 80s. And they've got more modern versions of it, but I don't know how much they're producing of it. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Adam. Jennifer.
You think it's a cliche when people will say they regret more the things they didn't do than the things they did? Because the things you did, you know how it came out. And things you didn't do, you don't know. So it's easier to...
think for most people, it's not a cliche, it's real. I think most people live dull, boring, uninteresting lives, and I think they know it. And they don't know what they should have done. It's not like they sit back and they rationally evaluate, oh, I should have pursued these values instead of this. But they get the sense that they're not happy, they're not fulfilled. There's a lot they haven't seen in the world. There's a lot they haven't done. And maybe the values that they regret not pursuing are the wrong ones. That doesn't really matter. What they really feel is the emptiness of unfulfilled life. And I think that is what is driving this response is, and you see, and the movies, right, emphasize this. I mean, it's a cliche in the movies, right? Go do it because you'll regret the things you haven't done. Well, maybe, but if I do it and something bad happens to me, then... but I don't think it's a cliche in life. I think people do land up regretting all the things they could have done and didn't do. And it's, again, more vague, fuzzy kind of notion, a vague, fuzzy kind of sense about life than it is specific things, right? But for some people it is. I married too young, I married too late, I should have married that person, not this person. I could have gone on a trip to Africa, I didn't do it. I could have had, I should have studied electrical engineering, could have been in, software. Instead, I got this boring job, I don't know, building bridges or whatever. So I could have left my comfortable job and started a company. I had the opportunity. My brother-in-law suggested it and I wimped out. So there's lots of those kind of situations where people feel like they could have, should have. But what they really know is life it didn't turn out the way they thought it was, particularly when they were teenagers, when you're idealistic, when you think amazing thoughts about your future and you think you're going to be happy and all of that. I think a lot of people end up having disappointing lives. And
I guess it is true that it's better to try and fail than never to try at all. That's probably true.
Probably true, with the caveat of some fails are irreversible. Right? I don't regret never skydiving. Although I always get the question, how much money? If we raised $1 million, would you go skydiving? So people are trying to get me to do it. But some things are irreversible. But yes, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. It's better to have tried and failed than never to have tried at all, given the trying and failing are within certain boundaries and are motivated by rational values, motivated by the right kind of ideas. Stephanie says she doesn't regret making 2 jumps. So she ticked her skydiving box. I never had the skydiving box, so nothing to tick there. So Stephanie has skydived. Good for her. All right. Shazbat, do you think that stem cells might be developed to the point that they could fix your back problem? In the meantime, can you recommend a pain reliever? I strained my lower back recently. I can't move without hurting. Okay, the obvious caveats are, I am not a physician. I am not a doctor. I'm not an expert on life extension. I'm not an expert on backs, although, I'm about as good of an expert on backs as probably anybody out there, given all the problems that I have. So let's start with the really good news. I mean, I think stem cells are already at a point where they could fix a lot of back problems. And here, I think Adam will appreciate the fact that the only reason stem cells are not used far more extensively for back problems is because of the FDA. So here's the story. It's a simple story. My doctor, so I had a ruptured disc, L3, L4, what was it, 2017. I went to the doctor and he said, look, we can clean it up, but we probably need to fuse it. And I said, he'd already fused L4 or 5. I said, I'm not fusing another thing. One fusion is all I'm doing in life. I'm not fusing it again. What I really want you to do is I want you to go in, clean it up, and inject stem cells into the gap where where I had a disc. And he said, I've never done it before. I said, I like you. I trust you. You're a good doctor. Figure it out. Literally, right? And he went away and he called up a bunch of people, and he called up the company that produces the machine that if you take bone marrow out of a person, it spins it and you can extract the stem cells. And these are not very good stem cells because they came out of me in my late 50s. So they're not exactly the most vibrant, eager to reproduce stem cells. So ideally, I would have saved my umbilical cord. It would be frozen somewhere, and we could extract stem cells from my umbilical cord. That would be the ideal, right? And then you could use your own young stem cells to do this. But anyway, he did this, and so I was the first ever that he did, and I think one of the few ever in California. So they brought the machine. People came to watch this because they'd never seen it before. It was all outpatient. I went in, they put me under, they make a hole in you, they put in the little robot, they go in, they scrape it all, they clean it all up. It's pretty cool science, pretty cool stuff. And then he went in and they take bone marrow out of my hip, they spin it, and then they inject not the bone marrow, but they inject the stem cells they extract from it into where the disc was. And it took, I had a few weeks of recovery, but it wasn't too bad because I was home that evening, so it was outpatient. When I had the fusion, I was in hospital for like 5-6 days. I mean, that was major surgery and major recovery time. Anyway, months later, we did an MRI. A year later, we did an MRI to see what happened. And there's a disc there. I mean, there's a disc between L3 and L4. I mean, it's not as robust as, but there's a disc there where there was barely anything before the surgery. Now there's a disc. So the stem cells stimulated the body to reproduce, disc. So I asked my doctor, I said, so you're doing a lot of these? Look, this is like, and he was all excited. He was going to write this up for a journal article. I don't think he ever did. But he said, stem cells are not approved for this use. The FDA has not approved it for this use. So if I start doing that, I can't advertise it. And he said, if I start doing it, I don't know if I'd get into trouble with the FDA. But he can't advertise it. He can't let people know. So as far as I know, people, because I've recommended this, and people have called him up and asked him if he's doing it, and he said no. So, and this is pure FDA. This is all about the FDA limiting the use of stem cells. Even when it comes to knees, they limit it, even though people have been using stem cells for knees for forever, and there are no side effects and no downside. It's constrained, and it's just horrific. So there are solutions. So Shazbat, there are places you can go. I think there's a guy in Houston that does it. There are places in Europe that do it. In Switzerland, you remember what's the quarterback? Peyton Manning. You remember Peyton Manning, the quarterback? He had it done in Switzerland in his neck. He had stem cells injected into his neck in Switzerland. But in the United States, it's almost impossible to do it. There are places in Panama, but I just don't know. But the FDA screwing up our lives in ways that are just horrific. Adam, you wanted to say something?
Yes. I had some work done on my one of my discs, and it was a very different situation, different operation, but it also was not FDA approved. I could not get the insurance company to pay for any part of it. But fortunately, number one of my students was the IT guy for the surgeon who does this.
Cool.
So the surgeon gave me a discount. And the other thing is the surgeon is a full professor at UCLA. And essentially his attitude was, fuck the FDA. If they go after a full professor at UCLA Medical School, it's their trouble, not
Good for
mine.
him. Good for him. I had to pay for this. So the surgery was paid for because the cleaning up, the going into called the laminectomy, that was paid for by the insurance. But anything to do with the stem cells was me. So I can't remember, it was either $3,000 or $5,000 that I had to pay out of pocket in order to have the stem cells done. That's another reason that he probably doesn't do it, is because insurance companies don't pay, and most patients don't want it. But if patients knew how much better this is, and my back, L3, L4 is not a problem anymore. My back is so much better than it was. Then it's worth $3,000 to $5,000. Even if you have to borrow money to do it, it beats a fusion any day. So I would fly to Panama to have it done today if that was an option. So it's just horrific what the FDA does. Now, with regard to the second question, in terms of pain reliever, I use ibuprofen. Here's another funny thing about ibuprofen, right? So in the United States, ibuprofen comes in capsules of 200 milligram, and they tell you to take maximum two capsules, right? So you get 400 milligram of ibuprofen. If you go to Europe and you go into a pharmacy over the counter and get ibuprofen over the counter, every single one of them, you can't find 200 milligram. They don't exist in 200 milligram. They're all 600, which is 3, right? That's the minimum dose you can take in Europe, right? And so you can easily take 3 ibuprofens. Again, I'm not a doctor. All the disclaimers, the FDA is going to come after me. You can easily take 3 because in Europe they do, and I don't see anybody dying from an overdose of ibuprofen. So if the pain is bad, I would take 3 ibuprofens, 600 milligram. For example, in the US, to get 600 milligram ibuprofen, you have to get a prescription from a doctor. Like when I have a toothache, my doctor gave me a prescription for 600 milligram dose of ibuprofen, which in Europe is over the counter sold. All these rules are so insane for these kind of things. But that's what I use. Now, if it gets really bad, you might want to go see a pain doctor, and they often do a cortisone shot. You have to find somebody who's really good. They do, like, they scan your back and they figure out exactly where the pain is emanating, and they'll go right to the nerve where the pinched nerve is, and they'll inject you with cortisone, which will reduce the inflammation around where the pinched nerve is happening, and that will eliminate the pain. So that's a number of different ways in which you can do it. I have no idea why today is the day where I'm giving medical advice. All right, let's do a few more of the super chat, and then we'll go to Jennifer. We've got 4 super chat questions. So if you're on live now and you'd like to ask a question, now's a good time. All right. Michael asks, why does Dubai have such an innovative and impressive skyline? Is there more freedom and capitalism there than the rest of the Arab world? Why is this? Have you been there? No, I haven't been there, and I probably never will go there. Maybe one day at the airports, because a lot of flights go through Dubai. But I have no intention of going there. Why is it? It's because they have a lot of money, and they want to make a splash. They want to be noticed. They want to project a certain confidence and an attractiveness to the world. They want to present themselves to the world as a modern, advanced place that worthwhile to do business in and worthwhile to come live in. They want you to go there. So what they've done is they've hired the best architects in the world who don't live in Dubai. They lived all over the world. And since they have a lot of money, because they are basically, it's not so much that they have oil, but they are the launch place for, they are where the ports are, the natural best ports in the Arabian Peninsula, in the Arabian Peninsula, from which you load up oil or you load up refined products to ship throughout the world. So they make a lot off of the oil trade. So they're very, very wealthy. It's a very small population. Many of the young men there are highly educated. They've been educated in the West, and they want to attract money. They want to attract finance. They want to attract vacationers. They want to attract people, and they build these amazing buildings in order to do that. And they've succeeded. I mean, they have some of the nicest hotels. They have some of the nicest office buildings in the world in Dubai. I wouldn't go there. I mean, it's still, from my perspective, from everything I can see about it, it is ruled by a pretty barbaric regime. Ultimately, they still treat women, even though they treat women there better than they do maybe in Saudi Arabia. They still treat women pretty badly. And if you're a Western woman, you could probably be okay there, but I don't think you'd feel comfortable there. They have, they have laborers that they bring in from places like Pakistan who do a lot of the manual labor and the manual work, which they treat as, I think, semi-slaves, semi-serfs in terms of their inability to go back home and just the way they're treated there and the amount of legal ability, legal representation that they might have. So it's not, they still, many people there tolerate Islamists, they fund Islamists. So it's not a place that now I will say there is an objectivist club in Dubai run by somebody who's attended a number of Okans. And so there is objectivist activity in Dubai. They meet regularly, they read Ayn Rand's books, they do stuff. I don't think it's explicitly objectivist, it's kind of stealth objectivist, but it's there, it runs. We have people who listen to the show from that part of the world pretty regularly. So, maybe I'm dated in some of the information I have about Dubai and United Arab Emirates. Maybe they're more modern than I think of them, but I doubt it. All right, let's see, Landon. Oops, what did I do there? Sorry. Landon asks, Peter Attia would talk about legal life extension on his very popular podcast. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of legal life extension. It's what we talked about in terms of the products that Elysium produces, this company called Elevant that produces them. There's the Life Extension Foundation that puts out a magazine. There's a lot of information out there. There are books. There's a lot of stuff that you can do mostly legally, although some things you have to go to Panama. Anything to do with stem cells, you have to go out of the country to really do extensively. But the sad thing is, why is anything illegal when it comes to this stuff? How dare they? It's my life. All right. Thanks, Robert. And then Stephen, can you lead me to where you speak about OPM film? What is OPM? What is OPM film? Oh, other people's money? God, I think that's other people's money. Where do I speak about other people's money? I don't know. I mean, I used to teach it. I used to speak about it in class, but I don't know that I've ever spoken about it in a lecture or a talk. I might bring it up in my defensive financial market course that the Ayn Rand Institute has just put out, but it's also available on the Y website. But I don't think in class, I literally, we went seeing, I had a VCR tape with the highlights that I would then discuss with the class, and we'd watch it together. We'd watch that. The two things I used to teach is that on Wall Street for the negative and this for the positive. So I don't know that I have a place where I actually discuss OPM. But if you have specific questions about other people's money, feel free to ask them. It's certainly my favorite movie about finance. And I think a very, very good movie in terms of capitalism and in terms of defense of capitalism. All right, let's see. Jennifer. You're muted.
Because of the law of identity, do you think sometimes someone could get confused because they could think that there must be fate because things behave a certain way in nature? So that means that certain things are going to happen to you. And then I've had people say this to me. So then they think that there's fate. It's like a confusion. Have you ever seen that happen before?
I think it's a rationalization. I mean, I think any kind of belief in fate is a kind of a mystical belief, or I mean, there's a sense in which it's true, right? If you make a particular decision about something, there are going to be consequences. You know, certain outcomes are more likely than others, and some outcomes are probably deterministic in terms of they're going to happen. If you jump out of an airplane, you're going to make it to the ground at, you know, varying speeds depending on whether the parachute opens or not. But you know, but there's no. So certain decisions have certain outcomes, and that is not fated, but that is determined. That has to happen. But it's not. Fate doesn't, think about it in terms of fate doesn't add anything to them other than bring in this whole mystical side, because otherwise there's no reason for them to use that kind of terminology. So I think it's a rationalization. But yeah, there's a sense in which as soon as you wake up in the morning and make the decision, I'm going to focus today or not, the rest of the day is kind of determined, right? But you know, not really, because you could always phase out. You could always unfocus anytime during the day.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question.
Sure.
If you have time. I've looked through the vitas of the candidates for Prime Minister of Great Britain, and they all have very impressive education and private sector experience, especially their private sector experience. And in the United States, that combination of first-rate higher education and first-rate private sector experience is just unknown among politicians. I'm fairly familiar with the backgrounds of the president and vice president and senators and congresspeople and governors, and nobody on the US political scene is anywhere near the least experienced politician on the UK list. Why is that?
So first, you know, I don't think that's true of education, because almost every president in the United States went to Yale, right? And even Trump got in, you know, went to a prestigious Ivy League university. So all of them have been to prestigious universities, and education-wise have done, you know, very, very well. I guess the Bushes had some, maybe senior more than junior, some real world experience, some running a business. Reagan, you know, was an actor and had a real job for a while, and so on. But yes, I think generally, so in England, almost all prime ministers have gone to the same private school for high school, Eton. You know, I think it's something like 40 to 50% of all prime ministers in England went to Eton, and you know, one of the big knocks against Churchill was he never went to Eton. He went, I think, to Harrow. So, but Harrow is like just up there with Eton, right? There's like 5 schools in England where everybody goes. But they almost all go to Oxford. They almost all study PP&E at Oxford. Philosophy, politics, economics, which is an Oxford degree, a degree that Oxford initiated. Most politicians in the UK go to Oxford and then go to the private sector and then enter politics. that's the path. So, why is it different in the United States? I think partially because of the parliamentary system. There's a sense in which in the UK there's a certain screening of who the candidates are that's done by the apparatus, and they try to get high quality candidates, and a lot of that has to do with the schools they went to and the life experience that they have. In the United States, in the old days, candidates used to be picked in smoke-filled rooms, right, in the back rooms. Now it's all voted. So, and you can see that in a primary, you can get 10 candidates, you can have 12 candidates running for their party's thing. So it becomes who's the most charismatic on the stump rather than who's the best candidate, who has the best education, the best knowledge, the best ideas. It's who can convince the most people. So we become much more of a democracy in that sense, all the way down, particularly within the political parties. I mean, I think the Republican Party could benefit enormously from having decisions made in smoke-filled rooms right now, and getting away from the popular, getting away from the people who actually are voting in the primaries, because the people who vote in the primaries are destroying the party. So I think that's part of it. What is interesting, though, is that my favorite candidate of the people who were running for UK Prime Minister, Kemi something, name I can't pronounce, did not go to a particular prestigious university. She went to the University of Sussex, which is okay, but nothing special. She did not go to Oxford. She actually went, most of her schooling was in Nigeria. She came to the UK. She was born in the UK, but then returned to Nigeria. She came to the UK at the age of 16 and went to a good school, a high school in the south of London, but nothing super, duper. And of course, she's Black. She's originally Nigerian. She's fantastic. She's articulate. She's smart. She's strong. She's principled. I think I mentioned this. The two of us took one side of a debate on capitalism a few years ago. So we were on stage together, and she was fantastic on stage. So she is by far my favorite candidate. Now she's been voted out, so she won't make it this round. And she is the least educated of them. The two to the left, Liz Truss and Sunak, Rishi Sunak, both of them are Oxford graduates. So both of them got PP&E, I think, degrees at Oxford. Rishi is I think, son of immigrants from India. So he's Indian. Liz Truss, I can't remember what her background is, but of the two, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm going to answer it anyway. I think I've said this before. My strong preference is Liz, primarily because she presents herself as an heir to Thatcher. She argues free market. This is the thing that tipped me for her. She is the first candidate I've heard that says one of the first things she's going to do as prime minister is scrap all the regulations on the books of the UK that originated with the EU, right? So the whole point of Brexit was, now we can control our own fate. We don't have to do what the European Union tells us. We can get rid of all the stupid regulations that we had to do because we were part of the EU. And then what happened? We got Brexit, and not a single one of those regulations went away. So we got the worst of all worlds. I kept saying that. The Brits got the worst of all worlds from Brexit. Truss is saying, no, we're going to go back and we're going to scrub all the regulations. We're going to get rid of all the ones that have to do with, that restrict our ability to compete, restrict our ability to produce, restrict the ability of producers to build and to make. She wants to abolish the carbon tax. She wants to lower other taxes. So of the two, she is by far, I think, the better candidate. I think Rishi is status quo. big on green, big on government spending, big on saving the NHS. So I'm hoping that she wins. And then we'll see how long she can govern for. There's elections in 2025, if she can survive until then. And then Labour right now in the UK has higher approvals than the Conservatives, but that might be transitionary. If she does a good job, the Conservatives can win again. So I'm endorsing, and I never endorse an American candidate because this is the difference, right? The English politicians are so much smarter, so much more intelligent, so much more educated, and they have the coolest accents. I prefer them by a long shot to the Americans because they went to Oxford. And in Oxford, one of the classes you take is a class in having a posh accent. I mean, you don't, but everybody coming out of Oxford has to have the right kind of accent. And that's the great advantage of, I don't know, Oxford accent just makes them sound smarter. But I'm a huge fan of what is possible in the UK. I think the intellectuals in the UK on the right, and the politicians in the UK on the right are broadly and generally superior to anything the United States has. I mean, take somebody like Daniel Hannan. I don't know how many of you have ever followed Daniel Hannan. He's definitely worth following. He was a parliament member. He was in the European Parliament. The guy's brilliant. And he is one of the best public speakers I've ever seen. He can capture an audience. He's a storyteller. He's principled. He's smart. He's sharp. He's excellent on trade. He's like just lower tariffs to zero. He is the anti-populist. He's good on economic issues. He's just really good. Now, I'm pretty sure Daniel Hannan went to Oxford. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. They all have. There was another British politician that invited me once to come and speak, and he sponsored an event I did in the Parliament building. That was really well attended in London, and he was, I forget his name now. He was in the UKIP party for a while, but he was excellent, very smart. We disagreed on certain things, but as compared to any politician I've ever met in America, I mean, literally, Daniel Hannan. There's no politician in America who comes close. I mean, he's secular. None of these politicians are religious, right? Like Liz Truss and Rishi, they're not religious. They might say they are, but they're not religious. They're all secular. And they don't buy into the BS that the Americans do. They don't have the national conservative. They don't have the populism. They don't have the xenophobia. In particular, somebody like Daniel Hannan seems to me completely secular. He might give, again, lip service to religion. So no, politicians in the UK and people from the UK might not want to admit this, are head and shoulders above the Americans. It's just a matter of finding the right ones. They had a Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was much better than Ronald Reagan. She did so much more, and she was much more principled. All right. Yeah, Tazy says she thinks Daniel Hannan was a bit pretentious. He's earned it. I mean, if you have that kind of accent, you can be pretentious. You can afford to be pretentious. So I think he's earned a little pretentiousness. Yes. Teshi thought I was better, but I'm not a politician, and I'm not running for anything, and I'm not competing with these guys. I'm pretty much better than any politician in the world right now. I'm even better than what's her name, Kimmy. But right. All right. John, do you know of any objectivist activity in Africa? Do Enlightenment ideas or free market ideas have any chance there, in your opinion? Yes, there is an objectivist club somewhere in Africa. They've got like a group thing in, I can't remember, Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on Twitter. So there's definitely an objectivist club. When was it? A few months ago, a couple of months ago, there was an event. I can't remember if it was Uganda or Kenya. And I just saw photos from the event, but the event was like, part of the event was young people, and they had a table full of books. And like Alice shrugged, a fountainhead were there, and they got the books from the Iron Man Institute. So yes, there's definitely activity in Africa. Is there a chance free market ideas will catch on this? Sure, why not? It's just a matter of getting people to read, engaging with them. It's fertile ground because it's virgin ground. There's definitely some interest in South Africa. There's definitely interest in Nigeria. There's some in Kenya and Uganda. The other place was Ghana. I've been invited to come and speak in Ghana. I haven't gone. I should go. But Ghana. So, there's no reason not. And I think there's a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of upside. All right, RDF. What do you think of this? The Senate voted in favor of the Chips for America Act. If passed, the bill would provide more than $50 billion to companies that will build semiconductor factories here in the United States. Yeah, I already commented on this a while ago when it was still being proposed. It's, the $50 billion is just part, I think it's a $300 billion bill altogether that provides all kinds of incentives and subsidies and preferences for chip manufacturers and others to build capacity in the United States. I think it's horrible. I think it's a disaster. I think it's a waste of money. I think it's terrible. I think it's a terrible idea. I don't think the government should be incentivizing companies to build this or that, to build this kind of manufacturing plant or that kind of manufacturing plant. And I don't think they should be incentivizing them to do it in the United States or outside of the United States. Why not build those manufacturing plants in Mexico? Why not build them in Canada? Why not build them, I don't know, in Puerto Rico? Who the hell knows where they should be built? That's the beauty of the marketplace, that the market determine it. The fact is that there's a lot of onshoring already of chip manufacturing. One of the things learned after COVID was that the companies producing chips want to diversify their chip manufacturing. For example, the South Koreans, I think it's Samsung, is already in talks to build, I think, 8 chip manufacturing plants in the United States because they worry about supply chains over the Pacific and what if there's a conflict with China. So markets adapt to new information. And the new information that we've received over the last 2-3 years is China's a lot less reliable than we thought it was. Because of Russian aggression, now I think the world is much more attuned to the fact that authoritarian regimes can be aggressive and are likely to be aggressive. So Russian aggression is transported into, maybe China will be aggressive too. So you're definitely getting you're definitely getting people waking up, but the market is waking them up. So a lot of companies, Apple included, but a lot of companies are diversifying their supply chains. They don't need Congress to tell them in what, where to, how much. Let the market work. Let people who actually know what they're doing, And this is what do you call it? Industrial policy. And I'm against industrial policy by Republicans, Democrats, independents. Industrial policy is always wrong and always bad. There are things you can do for national security, but then you have to be very, very careful, and you have to be very, very clear about what is national security and how to do it. Wanda Freeman says TSMC from Taiwan and Samsung from South Korea are building semiconductor plants in the United States. They are, without any subsidy, without $50 billion, without any of this nonsense. The market works. Leave it alone. All right, Free Trade asks from Sweden. So I'm supposed to give a talk in Sweden, but the guy I'm communicating with who invited me to give the talk in Sweden, doesn't respond to emails. So Free Trade, you know Oliver in Sweden, who has invited me to come and give a talk at the university in Sweden. And if you do, can you tell him to answer my emails? That would be nice. So I know what the hell's going on. All right, Free Trade asks, a proper capitalist party is necessary to sell actual capitalism to the public. just arguing the principles is necessary too, but it's hard for a lot of people to connect them to real world actual politicians' thoughts. Sure, one day we should really have a proper capitalist party, but it's way too soon. I mean, you need politicians, you'd need a lot of money, you'd need a hope to build a whole infrastructure of a political party. We already have a, what do you call it, a political party manifesto, right? That the Capitalist Party has already put together. That's pretty good. It's really good. It's basically an objectivist political manifesto that you could find online. What we need now is people who go out there and actually, act as politicians in the name of capitalism. But it's very difficult, and it requires a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort. And there's just not enough of us, and there's just not enough of us who are passionate enough to do it. So, I'll run. I'm willing to run for office. I've said this many times. I'm willing to run for office. What I'm not willing to do is, spend a year fundraising, raising money so I can run for office. But if somebody else is willing to raise the money, and if somebody is willing to write a check, I'll run for office. Now, I don't know what office I would run for. I was thinking when I was living in California for going for governor of California, but that would have been fun. But not without like a $50 million check. It's just a waste of time unless you have the money you're lined up. All right. And that's the problem. You need a lot of money. All right, Stephen, and then we'll go for last round with Jennifer and Adam, and then we'll call it a night, a day, or whatever it happens to be. All right, Stephen says, recently a 101-year-old Social Security guard, SS guard, not Social Security guard, former SS guard, yes, say former, because there are no SS guards anymore. Former SS guard was imprisoned for 5 years due to his crimes during the Holocaust. Is there a point where obtaining justice not valid anymore? No, I don't think so. If it's proven, if it's unequivocal, if there's no question about it, somebody committed horrible things, murder, horrible things in the past. Yeah, whatever the age is, destroy him. They deserve it. It's an issue of justice. People should not be allowed to get away with evil actions of that magnitude. Now, there is such a thing as a what do you call it? Wait, time has passed.
Statute of limitations.
Thank you, Jennifer. Statute of limitations. But the whole point of a statute of limitation is that beyond a certain point on certain types of crimes, it's just, you're depending on people's memories. It's hard to get the facts. It's hard to do it all. It's not an issue of there's no justice after that period of time. It's just that it's too difficult, too prone to error beyond a certain period of time. So I assume that there's no doubt, reasonable or not, that this guy really was an SS guard. And in such a case, let him rot for whatever rest of his life he has. I have zero sympathy for people who participated in the mass murder of millions of people. All right, Jennifer.
I'm done for today. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer's done. Adam? You can be done too.
I would be done too, but I don't have it in me to stop asking since we're there.
But you got one last question, and if somebody asks while you're asking, I'll take those super chat questions.
Okay.
But other than that,
do you think that we should have a federal or at least statewide standard for police training? Because the police is where the government meets the road.
yeah.
And the function of the government is to put legitimate force under objective control. And the police that we have now wouldn't know what objective control is if their life depended on knowing it, which it sometimes.
I think that's right. So I don't think it should be federal, because I'd like to see experimentation in it. I'd like to see different places do it differently, see what's objectively better. And I don't think you can come to what's objectively better without actually experimenting and seeing some in practice. So I'd like to see it on the, I guess, on the state level, or I'd like to see the state have certain minimum requirements that then maybe even at the local level can be experimented on. So that's how I'd like to, I think. I don't want to see too much at the federal level, except the federal government should be responsible for the big stuff, right? National defense, establishing laws where it's important to have standardization across the entire continent. Everything else should be left to the states. So the protection, the fundamental protection of individual rights, but is a federal thing, and then but the states get to, in terms of how it's expressed, they get to specify it at the state level. So I think at the state level, minimum requirements for policing should be established. Absolutely.
Well, there's one thing about the federal government that I personally benefited from. I was once falsely accused of a crime in New Jersey. And fortunately for me, the FBI found out that the state crime laboratory was corrupt. And they took over, and the state crime laboratory was under FBI supervision. And they were essentially able to show that the supposed evidence was false.
So I'm not against a federal agency like the FBI, who's partially responsible for making sure that the state level agencies are not corrupted. So being kind of the objective arbiter when there's a fear of corruption at the state level. But I don't want to see the state level replaced with a federal agency that one size fit all for a country of $350 million. I think we have to have the options and the experimentation. All right, friend Harper says, saving money for Gene Maroney's episodes, but wanted to contribute. Remember, folks, $2, $5 contributors are welcome also. Yes, and we're way off. I haven't even mentioned because we've been way off our $650 target, but I've decided I'm not going to bug you guys too much on these things. Let's see. Shazbot says, which is better, 1969 Trugo or 2010 Trugo? True Grit. Both are True Grit. I haven't seen 2010 True Grit. I'm not a huge fan, if I remember right, of True Grit from 1969 with John Wayne. But my guess is that anything made in 1969 that's a Western is going to be better than something that's made in 2010. Although 1969 was not a good year for Westerns. Good Westerns pretty much stopped being produced, I don't know, in 1960 or 59 or something like that. The Western as a genre went downhill after the late 1950s. And it became a kind of a cynical play on itself, represented by spaghetti Westerns, and True Grit, which presents the hero, if I remember right, as an alcoholic, I don't think I've seen the 2010. Maybe I need to see the 2010 True Grit, but I should do a show on Westerns. I actually did a talk once years and years and years ago, like 30 years ago, on Westerns. But they'll all be old Westerns. So you'll have to suffer through a show on old Westerns. Fender Harper says, do you think it's proper to mandate that kids get an education, different than mandating that they were able to learn specifically, but rather making sure the child is educated to some degree? No, I don't, because there's no way to educate somebody to some degree without educating them with certain content. And I don't think it's the job of the government to deal with the mind. Now maybe you can make cases in real child abuse that keep kids locked up in the closet where government should intervene there. But in terms of whether they should go to school or whether they should work, where they should, I don't think the government should intervene. I don't think it's the government's job. You don't have a right to an education whether a child is an adult or anybody else. So there can be the government protecting the ability of the child to get an education. So no, I don't think the government should be involved at all in any respect in a child's education. All right. Let's see. All right. I think we're done. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for participating. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Adam, for the questions, but also for supporting the show as you do. Thank you for all the super chatters for supporting the show. You guys can all support the show on a monthly basis, like Jennifer and Adam do, by going to Patreon or Subscribestar and using Yaron Brook Show. So patreon.com/Yaron Brook Show or subscribestar.com/Yaron Brook Show. And you can become monthly regular supporters of the show. It's the best kind of supporters, the ones I could rely on, the ones I know that is always coming in and can plan off of. That's great. So we will get my website back up and running. It's not quite there yet. So we're still working on getting the yaronbrookshow.com/support site up. But in the meantime, you can use Patreon and Subscribestar to make and locals to make a contribution. And of course, you can make a one-time contribution on PayPal. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you, Jennifer and Adam, again. And I'll see you all. What day is today? Sunday. So I'll see you all on Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Ron.